Good evening. We're up to 5 videos already. Welcome to the new subscribers. I appreciate you guys being here. As always, grab a blanket, grab some popcorn, and let's get into tonight's stories. I was home alone. It was the middle of the summer, and my parents had left for the weekend to go to our house on Cape Cod. It's about a 2-hour drive away, so it's no big deal for them to leave me alone for a few days. My mom had made some pulled pork and pasta for me to heat up and eat whenever, and I had some money if I wanted to order a pizza. Things were all good. The first night I was alone, I stayed up until 3 in the morning playing Xbox, so I woke up really late the next day. I checked my phone when I woke up and saw that it was a little past 1. I'd made plans to play some street hockey with my friends at 3, so I threw myself out of bed and stumbled into the shower. I take really long showers, so when my parents are gone, I go mental. I was there for about 45 minutes on my phone, scrolling through Reddit and Twitter and whatnot, when I heard my front door open. The bathroom is directly up the stairs from the back door, and the thing is pretty loud when it opens and closes. I immediately froze, since obviously I was supposed to be alone. I waited for about 2 minutes, ears trained in, trying to hear anything else. Nothing. I figured it was just the wind, or maybe my parents were home early, so I turned off the shower, wrapped my towel around myself, and slowly walked down the stairs to check it out. So the stairs of the kitchen, where the back door is, are pretty tight and walked in. So it's essentially like walking down a tighter version of this, but replacing the rail with a wall. So I can't see into the kitchen when I walk down. Even though my house is old, and each step on the stairs makes a super loud creak, I still took my time and tried to be as quiet as possible. I probably took 45 seconds walking down all 12 of the stairs. So when I got to the second to last stair, right before I could see around the corner into the kitchen, I take a little breath to compose myself. In my mind, I knew I was being stupid. There obviously wasn't anything in the kitchen, and there's no way I wouldn't have heard another noise, and there's no reason for them to still be in the kitchen, even if there were burglars or something in the house. After sort of mentally chastising myself for being such a wuss, I sort of chuckled at myself for being stupid, and just normally walk the last 2 stairs and turn the corner into the kitchen. Standing about 2 feet away from me in the middle of the kitchen is a man staring straight at me, perfectly still, with a massive smile across his face, just staring at me. The thing I remember most vividly wasn't his face or his smile, but his arms. They weren't just at his side. He held them in the strangest, most abnormal position I'd ever seen. They were where one would normally hold their arms, but he had rotated them to the point where they were almost completely reversed, as well as lifting them up and a little behind himself. I don't know why I remember this so much, but it's just the most demonic, abnormal position I've ever seen. Honest to God, I think I almost had a heart attack right there. Looking back, I can realize how creepy the situation was. But in the moment, I just took a step towards him and punched him as hard as I could in the jaw. Sort of half slapping / pushing him towards the ground. The second I connected, I beelined up the stairs, dropping my towel in the kitchen with my heart beating out of control. I sprinted into my room and locked my door behind me. I quickly put a chair up against the doorknob like you see on TV. Almost without thinking, I immediately called 911 and nearly in tears told the operator what happened. As I sat on the floor of my room, in practically the fetal position, staring at the door, praying that a cop would be here soon, I noticed the light coming from the gap between my door had stopped. He was standing outside of my door. There are no words to describe the feeling I had. I was paralyzed with fear, watching the shadow across the bottom of the door shift in tiny ways. I stayed balled up, staring at the gap, praying the man would go away for what seemed like an hour. All the while, the 911 operator was asking, "Hello, sir? Are you there? Hello?" I didn't want to make a noise, and even if I wanted to move my arms to bring the phone to my mouth, I don't think I could have. Eventually the light returned to the gap, and I heard the faintest footsteps, slowly creaking the wooden floorboards as he walked down the hall. It was silent for minutes as I just sat there curled up, unable to even speak. I heard banging on the front door and the sound of 2 officers entering my house. I finally felt safe, and I opened the door to the two of them standing there, and I almost cried. Nowadays, my parents don't leave me alone anymore. Thank God. I check every lock on the house before going to bed. I still get nightmares occasionally, and my heart starts racing whenever I see someone standing still, but I'm doing alright. Even working with sketch artists and a few lineups, the police never found whoever was in my house. This sends shivers down my spine every time I look outside, half expecting to see him standing across the street smiling under a lamppost. I have no idea what he wanted or who he was, but regardless, let's not meet. Ever again. He smells like garbage. He knows where I sleep. He wants to eat me. This one's wild. This is going to be long, but it's worth it. But just in case. TLDR. Crazy customer gets possessive. Over a year later, he hunts down my sister and finds out where I live. Police find him dead in his car, full of written intentions to eat me, piece by piece, while I watch. I was working at a sports bar in the morning, and a big dirty fella sat down in my section. He had shoulder-length wild hair and dirty torn clothing. You know, typical loony garb. But I'm a good waitress. I don't plan on treating him any differently than any other customer, so I greet him, and I'm instantly hit with the smell of garbage. I grew up neglected and abused, which is important for a few reasons, some of which come into play later. 1. I know what it's like to be judged, and I empathize and overcompensate when I deal with someone who I think has also been wrongfully judged. 2. My parents were creepy hoarders, so the smell of garbage and BO together especially, gives me anxiety attacks. 3. Because of the abuse and some other trauma, I have severe PTSD. The sports bar was the last job I was able to hold, which means I'm always on high alert and hypersensitive to my surroundings and possible threats. I think in terms of defense always, especially concerning my home. So even though the smell of this man was skyrocketing my anxiety, I treated him well. I figure he was down on his luck. He came in on all-you-can-eat taco bar day and stayed for 5 hours, so I figured he hadn't eaten much lately, which struck a personal chord with me because our parents didn't feed us and we often went days without food. I felt so sorry for him, so I went above and beyond with serving him. He obviously appreciated it, and he left. Nothing unusual. He returned the next week and requested me. This time he had brought some emails he printed out between him and his ex, and asked me if I could read them and then explain some of the things his ex said since I was a girl. I told him I would read it when I wasn't working, which I had no intention of doing, and I took them and shoved them in my purse. From the emails I could see that his name was Steve. He later asked what days and shifts I worked, and I lied through my teeth. He started asking other personal questions too. I'm used to this. I've waited tables for 8 years, and at this point I've dealt with a fair bit of creepers. So I have a whole fabricated life story on deck designed to deter any funny business. Stuff like my boyfriend was a giant with anger issues, I have nosy neighbors, etc. I remember that the only true thing I ever told him was that my sister worked at Subway, and I accidentally mentioned her name. I remember vividly because I had a very strong gut feeling that I shouldn't say it. I wish I had listened to that feeling. A week later, during one of my night shifts, Steve came in, and he was pissed. He demanded to know why I wasn't working when I said I was. I said I had traded a lot of shifts recently. Steve got super close to me and exclaimed that I better be here next time, and he left. A cook told me he had seen that guy sleeping in his car in the parking lot that morning, and he had seen the same car parked in the lot several times when he left at night. He knows it was the same car because it was filled with trash. Steve came back in after last call and told me he wanted to place an order, but I said it was too late, so he went to the bathroom. I watched for him to leave, and he never did. At this point, I have a panic attack building. I tell the bartender and manager what's going on, and him and the bouncer find him standing on the toilet in the stall. They drag him out and tell him he can never come back. I told my boyfriend, so when he picked me up, he brought 2 friends, and I discreetly hide my face and disguise myself when I left, checking the mirrors to see if we were being followed. Steve never came back, and I ended up quitting shortly after anyway. Eventually, my boyfriend and I broke up, and I kept our apartment and had my sister move in. A few months later, things took a turn for the worst. I started dating my girlfriend, who was from a small town, and she wanted to take a weekend trip back home. When we got back, one of the window panes was busted in a multiple paned window. I asked my sister about it, and she said she hadn't noticed. She hadn't left the house all weekend, and she didn't hear glass breaking or anything else suspicious. This did not feel like a break-in attempt, and the more we thought about it, the scarier it became. 1, we were dead broke. There's nothing you could get any money from inside. Trust me, I've tried. And that's evident no matter what window you look in from. Like I said, I think defense. So all the windows have blinds, but there are a few gaps in them from the cats. I've looked through these gaps multiple times to be completely aware of what can and cannot be seen. Also, I put long screws in all the window frames so they can't be opened more than 4 to 6 inches. 2, the window pane was pried out, not busted in, meaning they knew someone was home and they didn't want to be heard. 3, it was the only night in over a year that I had left town. I didn't put it on Facebook and only told a few good friends. Neither my sister nor I have cars, so you can't look in the driveway and see who's home. The next night, we heard the neighbor's dogs barking and growling, and we heard footsteps in the yard. I grabbed the gun. I went to the living room next to the yard and listened, thinking to myself, be smart. Is this 2 feet or 4? And the second I realized it was bipedal, I started flipping the lights on and off rhythmically to make the person think we were signaling our neighbor. That made them leave. Sign 4, it wasn't a break-in attempt. You don't return to the house you failed to break into the day before. My sister and I got tasers and wasp spray. It's cheaper than pepper spray and it sprays further. Because I don't have a CNC and my sister won't touch a gun. The rest of the week was quiet and my sister was now armed. So that weekend, my girlfriend and I decided to go out. We got in a stupid fight that night, and when she dropped me off, I threw $20 in her car and said something snarky, like, here's my half of the tab, and went inside. She noticed when she was a few blocks away and texted she was going to come get it back, but I told her not to. She knocked, but I didn't answer because I was mad. I heard footsteps come up to my bedroom window, and I waited for her to knock on the window so I could yell and tell her to not come. But she just walked off. She texted to say she took the $20 in the screen door, so I got up to grab it, and there was nothing there. I told her it wasn't there, and asked if it could have fallen out, and it wasn't possible. Then I asked why she walked to my window, and she said she hadn't. This meant whoever saw her leave the money had to be 50 feet or less from the door. It had only been 3 minutes tops from when she dropped it off to when I checked, and the only place that it could have been was our backyard. It also means whoever walked up to my window knew my girlfriend was there to see me and knew which room was mine. A week later, we heard footsteps in the yard again. I did the same routine, grabbed the gun, stood in the living room, started with the lights. Then I had an idea. This person needs to think that they can be seen. So I started to flip the switch every time I heard a step. Once they noticed, they started running. So I ran to look out the peephole to see a big fella with wild hair running down the alley. Even though I didn't get a great look, the general outline looked like Steve. So I started looking for the emails he gave me. Like I said, I'm always on high alert, and he raised concern. The second I noticed his full name was on the emails, I decided I was going to keep them. I get his last name and searched his public record. Then I pulled up his most recent mugshot and asked my sister if she had seen the man before, and her face went ghost white. She said yes. He smelled like garbage, and that made her anxious too. He came into her job a few times. But every time he came in, he asked her lots of questions. She said she'll never forget the creepy, menacing smile he plastered on his face the second she told him her name, and the feeling of pure fear it gave her. She rides her bike to and from work, so I'm betting he followed her home. One thing became painfully clear. He didn't hurt my girlfriend when she left the money. He didn't touch my sister when she rode her bike home. This was about me. The second she told me this, I called the cops. I gave them the emails, and I told them everything I knew down to the name of the cook I knew could describe his car. They found his car within weeks. It was abandoned by the lake, It was full of trash, a few personal belongings, and pages on pages of his crazy thoughts and intentions. There were hundreds of pages about me and what he thought he knew about me, my sister, and a checklist of all of the subways he checked to find her, what he learned from her, the layout of our home, my girlfriend's info, and the most messed up, his very sexually charged plan to keep me alive while he cut me up and ate me. The plan was to break in, kill my sister, and wait for me to come home. Then he was going to cut off a piece of me a day and make me watch while he ate it and touched himself. In less than 24 hours, the cops found his body in the lake.